Okay, hello, humans. This is part five. This is the final part of my little series on addictions and substance abuse in the old Chinese books. And so we spent four parts talking about wine and alcohol in its various forms, but now we've got three other things. There's tea addiction, opium, and tobacco they talked about in the old books. So here we go. Oh, and I forgot there's one slide I missed that should have gone back with the wine stuff. I wanted to remember, so I added this in. It's out of place, but just in case you're doing acupuncture, I searched through Zhenzhou Dacheng, and the only point that really talked about alcohol was Shuaigu, which is GB8. And so that's over the ear apex, of course, on the gallbladder channel and the head, and it governs vomiting due to liquor damage. So, like hangover or something like that and phlegm dizziness. So, of course, you're going to need to select other points based on the situation. But if somebody is throwing up after drinking too much, maybe this point will help. Anyway, let's get to today's issues. Yes, the Chinese were aware of other addictions, but some of our modern addictive substances, like Western pharmaceuticals, opioids, and, other things they didn't really talk about. Surprisingly, they didn't talk about cannabis in the medical texts. Or, I mean, of course, there's like Homa Ren, which is, the seed of cannabis, which is used for, moistening the intestines and so forth. But there's certain things that are kind of surprising that they didn't talk about, but let's go over the ones that they did. I was a little surprised that there are some references to tea addiction. Not a lot. Okay, this was not a topic that became, commonly discussed, but so drinking tea became popular in China during the Tang Dynasty, and then this is the Yuan Dynasty. After the Tang, there's the Song Dynasty and then the Yuan Dynasty. So, this is a few hundred years after people started drinking tea. And originally, drinking tea was not necessarily the same that we put the leaves in and pour hot water, but they ground up the tea, kind of like matcha, the Japanese powdered green tea kind of thing. And, so it took time for different methods of making tea to develop. But in any case, they recognize that some people have tea craving, or, there are other terms that are sometimes used, but this word has a couple of meanings, but like the meaning here is like craving for tea. And so, what about coffee addiction? They don't talk about that because they didn't have coffee. But in any case, so this is from a book that's attributed to Zhu Danxi, but it was actually written by some of his students or followers after he died, based on their notes and so forth. Zhu Danxi was one of the four great masters of the Jin and the Yuan dynasties, and he is the first one I found that talked about tea craving. So he has a formula of Shirgao, gypsum, Huangqin, and Shengma. Kind of a weird formula, very heat clearing, but tea itself is supposed to be cooling. So don't ask me to explain the formula. I'm just reporting. Powder the above, mix it with granulated sugar, and take it orally. It doesn't really say how to take it, but I would imagine you'd pour hot water on it and then, drink it like a sun formula, like a powder formula. And we're going to see sugar a lot in today's, various addictions that we're talking about here. So, and then he has a little story. Somebody loved drinking tea And here's the formula. Well, is it so bad to drink tea? Actually, one way to say drink tea is actually eating tea. This says literally eating tea because they use something like matcha, like the green tea powder that we know more from Japanese style these days. But, you actually would mix up a foamy broth and drink it, including the the grounds, the dregs, the whatever. And, I'm sure today that green tea powder is mixed into various things and taken like into smoothies or into like flavoring ice cream or whatever. So anyway, so this literally says eating tea because that's a phrase that's used for it. So um Baiju soft Shurgao. I was just trying to look what that is. Shurgao is gypsum, and it's mentioned up here too. And there's like a hard Shurgao and a soft Shurgao, but I really didn't understand the difference. Anyway, it's used in building materials and other things. It's used in making plaster. But it says soft sugar. Okay. And then Huang Qin is, cut into slices. This had Huang Qin up here too. Bai Xiao, peppermint, bohe, large leaves, and Dan Nan Xing. So, Qian Nan Xing is erismatus, is it? I don't do the Latin names, okay? But Dan Nanxing it's mixed with bile. I think pig bile. Um, so that's the formula. And it wants you to grind this into a powder and again mix into a paste with granulated sugar. And then after meals, I guess, you give a spoonful of paste and they just kind of dissolve it in their mouth and swallow it. Just like when you eat peanut butter, it gets, it's like a paste and then it has to kind of dissolve in your mouth, something like that. Well, so we can see Shurgao, Huang Qin, and then some other herbs in between these two formulas. Okay, and sugar. So before we talk about the next stuff, we have to talk about this word chong, the character is three insects. These are three bugs. And so this is from a Ming Dynasty, late Ming Dynasty book in the section on problems due to bugs, which can include any, like, really sometimes I translate as creepy crawlies because it includes insects, snakes, reptiles, worms, parasites, mythological bugs, invisible bugs, insubstantial bugs, and all kinds of stuff. So here I'm translating it as bugs, but interesting that they're mentioning Chong here, and they'll also mention it under tobacco addiction. And the basic idea is that these things may have bugs, and the bugs get inside your body, and then the bugs want more tea because the bugs were eating the tea or the tobacco. And so when the tea or the tobacco is gone, those bugs are still hungry for more. So they make you crave. Um, and actually, for parasites, I'm not saying that these addictions are from parasites. I am not saying that. But with parasites can make the person desire to eat very specific things. And so people will eat weird things when they have certain types of parasites, right? Anyway, so now you know that when I say bugs, it's this word chong, and here we're talking about kind of invisible bugs. Just like with phlegm, there's substantial phlegm and there's insubstantial phlegm. So these are insubstantial bugs, maybe. And so he says even insubstantial things can engender bugs because he's talking about bugs. Okay. So, for example, strong tea and turbid wine are innately insubstantial. I think because they evaporate, and they don't have physical body like food does or things. So since they can evaporate, then they're called insubstantial. But the dregs which settle out are quite able to develop into this disease. So, tea has dregs, turbid, wine has dregs before it's filtered. So the condition of tea craving or wine accumulations can also develop into bugs after a long time. If the bugs develop from tea, the person constantly thinks of drinking tea. If they develop from wine, the person will be desperately addicted to wine. When they don't get what they desire in a day, they cannot be content for that day. And this is what we're talking about here. Okay, that's an interesting explanation. This book goes on to say to treat someone who likes to eat dry tea leaves or tea craving. And remember, I told you eating tea is, probably referring to some of the older ways of serving it, where it's more like matcha. And so here's the formula. Han Shui Shi, which is some kind of mineral or stone. And they want it calcined first, which means like exposed to intense heat, and then it's easier to grind. Zhangzhu, the other kind of Atracta lotus, dry stir-fried. Huangqin, we saw that in the previous tea thing from Judanshi, and they want that wine stir-fried. So you sprinkle on some yellow rice wine and then let it soak in, and then fry it dry. So then peppermint leaves, which we also saw, and dan nanxing, which we also saw in the previous. So it seems like he's taking some of Judanshi's idea, and actually he doesn't have shirgao. He has this other stone, which is like a white mineral that looks similar. Baishao, that was mentioned before. Wine fried again to make it less cooling and more moving. Jupi, which is like chenpi. I don't know this ju here. I don't know for sure what it is. It can mean like a dark red. So, maybe it's some kind of blood orange or some kind of citrus that's, dark red. But it's the peel from this type of citrus. And shizhenzi flesh, which is some kind of seed, 5 chen of each, so equal portions, and you need to powder them together and make pills by pounding it into a paste with brown sugar and shenchu, the masa fermentada. So here it says, actually, literally, it says black granulated sugar. So, that's probably like dark brown sugar and shenchu. So you're like, pounding it together. Maybe you use a little liquid to make it into a paste, and then swallow each dose on an empty stomach with hot sugar water. Again, there's sugar in it, and you're supposed to take it with sugar water. So we're going to see sugar so much in this section. Okay. So here's opium addiction. Well, of course, today, most of you listening are not seeing people who are actually lying on a couch smoking opium or eating opium, but opioids. Yeah. So I don't know if these formulas will be useful, but here, let's see what they have to say. We saw this book, Yanfang Xinbian, in section 4 of this 5-part series, resolving toxins from smoking opium. So here it's describing like this person is really passed out from overdosing on opium. Their body is cold, their qi has expired, and the victim appears to be dead. If the body is still soft, because rigor mortis, bodies get hard when they've been dead for a while. If the body is still soft, the qi of the organs, channels, and blood vessels is still circulating. The victim is not really dead yet. This is the result of being lost in strong opium intoxication. Place the person in a moist shaded place and force their teeth open with chopsticks. Some people rub their jaw with that kind of plum thing, wume, and it will open. Place a chopstick horizontally inside their mouth to keep it open, and then constantly pour cold water into them. It's even more wonderful to mix white granulated sugar with cold water and pour it in. I don't know why so much sugar. Are we trying to raise their blood glucose? Are we, anyway, cold water, maybe that'll wake them up and the sugar will, get some nutrition into them. And because this one isn't about stopping the craving. This is about reviving somebody who's like seriously intoxicated. It goes on. Externally, use 2 or 3 handkerchiefs that have been thoroughly soaked in cold water. Place one on the front of their chest and keep changing it, when it warms up from their body. If it warms up, put more cold water cloth on their body. An entire block of tofu can be used instead. Remember for the wine addiction, when somebody's dead drunk, they had you place tofu all over the whole body. That was in an earlier section too. So tofu seems to be able to pull out toxins in this respect. Also place their hair in a basin of cold water and change the water constantly. We saw that also before for alcohol. Be sure they're not exposed to the sun. As soon as they see sunlight, they cannot be rescued. So, the image of an opium den is that it's a dark place. And I think, their pupils are very dilated and that the light, intense light is painful for them. But here it's saying that it will even make it so they can't recover. This is some kind of opium pipe. After 3 or 4 days, when all the opium chi is dispersed, they will live. If their body is not hard, they can return to life, even if it has been up to 7 days. Be sure not to take this type of case as impossible to rescue. So don't put them in a coffin and put them in their burial clothes too soon. This method is still effective no matter what dose of poison, meaning the opium, light or heavy, even if their hands and feet have turned bluish black. Oh, I want to remind you that this is Qing Dynasty, and in the Qing Dynasty, this is when England and other countries are forcing opium into China because China had stuff the West wanted, like China place settings and silk and tea, but the West didn't have much that China wanted. So they would go, like the Dutch East India Company and British merchants would go to India, get opium, go to China, force them to buy the opium, and then they had something to trade now. And once people were addicted, then people wanted it. And so there were the opium wars at this time, and like patriotic Chinese hated the idea of opium because it made the people, like not want to resist the foreign incursion. And that was part of the idea, I'm sure. Anyway, so he goes on to say, by all means, avoid pouring in or giving the patient soy sauce. So pouring in means they're unconscious, but you dribble the liquid into their mouth. Because remember, you put a chopstick in their mouth so you can dribble liquid in. So, they're saying sugar water is good, but soy sauce? Or if you do, they'll develop some kind of toxicity, and then the treatment is ruined. And also, if you give them random herbs, they can't be saved. After they return to life, again, they should take a lot of white granulated sugar in water. And then they also say fresh powder of dudo, which is the mung beans, drenched with water, is also quite effective. We also saw mung beans to detoxify alcohol mentioned earlier. So it seems some of the same things that worked for alcohol may have some modification, but may also work for other type of toxicity. beans like ludo are also used for food toxicity. Anyway, so another formula. Loosely rip apart 6 qian. A qian is was 3.73 grams at this time of this mumian hua. It's some kind of cotton flower. I'm not sure if it's from an actual cotton plant or if it's something that kind of has a cottony like flower, but this is like cotton balls. Okay. So you like fluff them out and pull them, they're all kind of condensed and held together, and you kind of fluff them out and pull them apart somewhat. And they want, especially this thing that was grown in Guangzhou, and then use a large tile earthenware basin. Use fire tongs, like, forceps kind of thing, and put the cotton balls in the basin, hold the cotton with the tongs and set it on fire until it finishes smoking and becomes ash, and then let the ash fall into the basin. Add 2 qian of table salt and pestle the ash and salt together with a wooden stick, making it really fine powder. Drench it with half a bowl of boiled water inside the basin and kind of wash the ashes with the hot water all around the basin and keep mixing the ash and the water evenly with chopsticks. I imagine you're kind of like rubbing it together to try and help it dissolve into the water, and then you keep stirring with the chopsticks or else it will settle out. And then have the patient swallow it all down, including the ash that is carried in the hot water. And in a short while, the opium toxins will be vomited out. So this is supposed to induce vomiting. Okay, so I need to tell you something. Sometimes opium is smoked, but opium is also eaten. And so maybe here they're talking about opium that was eaten, because then if you vomit it out, it'll come out of your stomach. Again, it says if somebody's swallowed, let me look at this word. This really is swallowed. So here they are talking about eating opium as opposed to smoking opium. If someone has swallowed up to 6 or 7 qian of opium, pour 2 consecutive doses of this medicine into them. Remember, pouring in is pouring the liquid into their mouth if they're unconscious and unable to drink it. If you reach them within 3 or 4 quarter hours, they had like 2 hour periods, so a quarter hour would be a half hour in our time. So that would be like an hour and a half to 2 hours, if I can talk and do the math at the same time. Anyway, the opium toxins can still be vomited out. So, if it's pretty soon, if it's within a couple hours, they can still vomit it out, which will help. If the patient has swallowed up to 1 liang, which it would be 37.3 grams or a little more, continuously pour 3 doses of the medicine into them. When the effect of this medicine arrives, it can automatically return yang little by little. So they've had collapse of yang, their body is cold and limp, right? And so, this vomiting it out will help get rid of it, and this will help revive them. They'll recover after a lot of vomiting. If they do not vomit, it sometimes drains out through the stool, meaning it could give them diarrhea, and that's actually, well, it's messy, but it's good to get the toxins out. The opium toxins will still automatically resolve and be removed if they get diarrhea instead of vomiting. This is good advice, not just for, opium, but in general. Whenever you're trying to rescue someone, you cannot be frantic. You must attentively prepare the medicine according to this formula. If you can prepare the medicine according to the instructions, it's going to be miraculous. But yeah, don't panic. Here's another formula. It will immediately resolve when you pour clear oil into the patient, because opium smoke is sticky and stagnates in the intestines and stomach. So somehow when it's exposed to oil, it's absorbed into the oil and passes through. I guess. Then so those up to this point, it's mostly been about reviving a patient who's OD'd. And here now it's talking about, stopping the addiction. So, again, brown sugar. It literally says red sugar, but that means brown sugar. We saw black sugar, that's dark brown sugar is my best bet. And then gansao, but not jirgansao, just plain old gansao. And then chuanbei mu, it wants you to remove the core, which is like usually what they say for chuanbei mu, and grind into powder and old ginger. So not, young, tender ginger. Okay. And then first simmer opium ash, 5 chen, into a paste. Okay, so you're taking the ash from an opium pipe, 5 chen of it, simmer it into a paste, and then add the above herbs, simmer together, remove the dregs. If the patient does 1 chen of opium a day, he should eat 5 chen of this medicine, and each day decrease it a bit. At the same time, drench brown sugar with water as a substitute for tea. So instead of them drinking tea, pour hot water on brown sugar and have them drink the sugar water. And this will help break the addiction. If their addiction is really heavy, reboil the liquid that was already boiled from 10 cups, boil it down till it's 1 cup, and taking it again will be effective. I think this is like boiling the dregs again. But this is what it says. And then he tells us a story. Someone was addicted for more than 20 years, but he broke the addiction using this formula. Don't underestimate it. Okay, so the opium ash probably still has a bit of, active ingredient in it. And so it's kind of a way of decreasing the dose, I guess, plus the sugar and the other herbs. This he has a really long section about this. Anyway, here we go. Another formula, drink the juice from pumpkin vine. And here it doesn't say pumpkin, it says pumpkin vine, but maybe they do mean pumpkin. Of course, if you've ever eaten in a Thai restaurant or, Indian restaurant, they have pumpkin recipes where the pumpkin looks different than what we think of for Halloween. But nangua is pumpkin. Okay. Yeah, shigua is watermelon. This is pumpkin. Okay, so do you remember pumpkin seeds are anti-parasitic? Anyway, so again, this pumpkin is mixed with red sugar, which means brown sugar. Yellow sugar can also be used. I don't know if you've seen like cane sugar. It can be a little yellowish. It's not really white. I guess it depends on how far it's refined, or maybe this is light brown sugar. Red sugar is brown sugar, black sugar is dark brown sugar, something like that. Anyway, this has miraculous effects. Also, if someone who has already given up opium addiction, they should eat nangua, they should eat pumpkin often in normal times to avoid developing other diseases. Otherwise, he may still have trouble in the future after a couple of years, even though he's broken the opium addiction. This thing about pumpkin has been secretly transmitted from the West. Okay. Who knows what the West means? I mean, the West could mean Persia. The West could mean Europe or the US. And so there are other formulas in the book. I don't have everything about opium from the book. You can see it's a pretty large section. But here's another one I picked out. Simmer gansao, just gansao, that's all, into a paste. Mix it with opium and inhale it Um, yeah, this can mean, I mean, this is probably meaning it's a paste. And even though that means inhale, it can also mean to absorb or to suck it in. So just like you suck through a straw. Um, anyway, so I don't, you're not taking this, inhaling through the nose. You're, taking it, I believe, because, this has the word food here or eat. So this is through the mouth. In 2 or 3 days, the addict will gradually lose the desire to inhale opium. This is the easiest formula since it's inexpensive, just gun sour licorice, and it does not harm the patient. After breaking the addiction, he will not have the disease of opium dysentery. So I looked, and one of the possible symptom that happens frequently when somebody is, detoxing from opium addiction or opioid addiction is abdominal cramping and diarrhea. And in fact, in the old days, opium in the West used to be given to stop diarrhea. So when you stop and opium addicts are frequently constipated. And so when you stop the opium, then the constipation goes away, but it can turn into extreme diarrhea. Okay, so they're saying if you break the addiction this way, they won't have that problem. If the addiction is severe, treated according to this method, it will break the addiction in a month. Okay. Well, I don't know if any of that's useful for the opioid crisis, but that's what the old books say about opium. Not so old, only Qing Dynasty, but still, they're not even 20th century. Um, okay, so let's finally talk about tobacco. Okay, so obviously tobacco came from the West, from the Americas. So there was no tobacco in um, China before there started to be, some kind of Europeans plundering the Americas. Um, okay, and so here, this is 1640. Zhang Jiebin in 1640 wrote Jingyue Chuanshu. Well, he probably wrote it before that, but that's when it was published. And so at this time, tobacco was recent, but became popular pretty quick, it seems, from reading this. So he's talking about tobacco. Its flavor is acrid, its chi is warm, its nature is slightly hot. It carries things upward and it's yang. Inhaling the burning smoke can strongly intoxicate people. So I don't know about you, but when I was a teenager, I wanted to smoke because it was cool. I think it's less cool today, which is good. But the first times you try smoking, you get really dizzy. Okay. At the time of use, only inhale 1 or 2 mouthfuls. If a lot of it is inhaled, it makes people fall down drunk. They revive after a long time. If it's serious, give them a mouthful of cold water to resolve it and they will sober up. If they have vexation and oppression feeling, then just use white sugar to resolve it and they will be at ease. They're really into this sugar thing, aren't they? This is also an extraordinary thing, he says. And now he's going to start telling you his experience with it. At the time of inhaling tobacco smoke, you have to open the whole length of your throat to inhale the smoke down and make it extend directly to the lower jaw. Just like, remember, the lungs descend chi and the kidneys have to receive that chi. That's what he's trying to do. But it's acrid, so it's moving. And when the chi of tobacco smoke moves up, it can warm the heart and lungs. When it moves down, it can warm the liver, spleen, and kidneys. After taking it, it can flow freely through the body, warming and making the person sweat a little bit. Original yang is suddenly robust. So he's liking it. But he'll also talk about it has its problems. So what therapeutically did he think tobacco smoke should be used for? You can use it to treat the exterior or the interior. So first, for the exterior, it's good at expelling all kinds of yin evils, cold toxins, mountain mists and miasmas, and wind damp evils, obstructing the tsoli, the pore-like structures, to treat sinew and bone pain. It really obtains effectiveness in a moment, a miraculous prescription. He's loving it. When it's used to treat the interior, it's good at strengthening stomach qi, increasing food intake, dispelling cold stagnation and yin turbidity. It disperses drum distension, which is a severe kind of edema in the abdomen, and lodged food stagnation. It stops vomiting and retching and sudden turmoil or cholera, huolun. It eliminates accumulations and gatherings, which are two types of abdominal masses. It gets rid of all kinds of chong, the bugs or the worms. Here it probably means parasites, and resolves bound constraint. It stops pain and it moves qi and qi stagnation and blood stasis. It raises up sunken things, for example, rectal prolapse. It frees all three jiao and produces immediate results. He loves it. He says it's been transmitted everywhere. He means everywhere in China, people are smoking it. Today, in the southwest region of China, everyone from young to old can't take time away from smoking morning and night. When I first got this substance, I was still very suspicious of it because it came from the West. It's a foreign thing. I practiced taking it several times. Then I knew the nimbleness of its functions, which were due to its nature. Since this substance belongs to pure yang and is good at moving and scattering, it's only miraculous for those with yin stagnation. No one should use it if they have yang abundance, if qi is like rushing upward, if they have a lot of dryness and fire, or if they have qi deficiency with shortness of breath and copious sweating. So he likes it against turbid yin. He doesn't like it if you have yang or fire or dryness. Yeah, he's pretty enthusiastic about it though overall. He continues. Some suspect that because of its ability to make a person drunk in an instant, its nature must be toxic. How is it that in other places people have practiced taking it for a long time? They never heard that it harms people. It must be that its yang qi is strong and fierce. If someone cannot overcome its yang qi, they become drunk when they inhale the smoke. Since it can dissipate evils, it must also consume qi. Anything that releases the exterior or that like breaks up accumulations is going to dissipate qi somewhat. So he's saying that, yeah, this can be really good for certain types of excesses, but it can also consume qi. This is logical, of course. So tobacco smoke easily dissipates, and then people's qi follows that dissipation and leaves. Its yang nature lingers within, swirling and engendering qi. So this is supplementation within its consuming. In other words, yeah, you lose some, but it also has some ability to engender qi. It's a little confusing here. Maybe he's intoxicated with tobacco smoke when he wrote this. And so as a result, people often like to take it and they don't see the harm. But he thinks it's good if you have too much yin, but not if you have too much yang, it seems to be. Okay, we're moving. I think this is the last text. We have a few slides from it, but I think this is the last text that we're going to see talking about tobacco. And so this is by a Qing Dynasty book but it's called Omissions in Bansaogangmu. So Bansaogangmu is a huge book by Li Zhijian, published in 1596. And it's huge. It has so many herbs in it. But this Zhao Shuimin thought that some things were missed in Bansaogangmu. So he wrote kind of an addendum. Some of the things it makes sense that plants that come from the New World, so-called New World, might have been missed in Bansaogangmu because, that was a lot earlier and there's less time for things to be transmitted to China. Anyway, so he writes about tobacco. And he quotes somebody, I don't know who this person is, but this person said, whenever people smoke tobacco, it engenders bugs in their abdomen. Remember, we saw tea can engender bugs? They look like flies with two beating wings. So actually, there are tobacco bugs. There are also some bugs can like tea. And so, here is some tobacco thing, like a cigar that the bugs have gotten in it. It looks almost like bookworm. I don't know if you've ever seen an actual book that's been eaten by a bookworm, but it looks kind of like this. So this is like a bug-eaten cigar, and here's like a tobacco bug. And he said they look like flies with two beating wings. Yeah, okay. The bugs long for a smoke, or they long for smoke, which nourishes them. So the person smokes all day long because the bugs are making him do it. And they're too busy to take care of themselves because they're just smoking, and that's that. As time passes, the bugs flourish and the zangfu, the organs, decay more each day. Disease breaks out and medicine cannot rescue them. They constantly smoke tobacco as things become more critical and begin the process of closing their eyes, which means dying. Alas, he goes on and he has a formula to treat tobacco addiction. Poke several holes in fresh tofu, 4 liang of tofu. Put black granulated sugar, which would be dark brown sugar, I guess in our terminology, 2 liang of that on top of the tofu and steam it in a food steamer so that the brown sugar melts on top of the tofu. And you've poked holes in the tofu so it sinks into the tofu. Every time they long for tobacco, they should eat several spoons of this. After only 3 days, all the bugs will descend. And what they're saying is this is the same word that means inducing a bowel movement. Okay, so it's saying all the bugs will come out when the person has a bowel movement. When the patient smells tobacco aroma, after they've had this treatment, they will vomit and have no desire to smoke it. Okay. So we see tofu and brown sugar and, mung beans and certain things we see repeatedly, don't we? He goes on to say tobacco has toxins. For someone who is struck by its toxins, boil hu huang lian. We saw that in our earlier formula, blended with tea. So now we're going to get addicted to tea instead of tobacco. Drink it. A Cantonese doctor said, for tobacco toxins, take black granulated sugar blended with well water. Okay. And then back to the Yanfang Xinbian, which is this Qing Dynasty book that we've seen in a couple of, these 5 sessions. We've seen it in more than one. And he says, damage from drunkenness due to smoking a hookah or a pipe. Hookah is a water pipe type thing. It's used to smoke opium as well as tobacco, as well as other things. So it's not clear to me, which one. Oh, well, it has smoke. So this is probably tobacco in any case, but it could be something else. And again, we have hu huang lian in water and add tea. We saw that on the previous slide, and the patient will recover when he takes it. Damage from tobacco drunkenness. It will resolve after drinking salt water, soy sauce, or sugar water. We saw no soy sauce with what? Was that with opium? Yeah, no soy sauce with opium. Or sugar water, again, sugar water, and all of these are equally effective. Well, that's basically what I've been able to find on addictions. I know it's not 100% enlightening and satisfying, but maybe some parts of it are useful. Okay, so that's the end of this series. Yeah, thanks.